The honeymoon phase, riding the wave of initial excitement, the thrill of new beginnings. 3 months into managing the construction of a wind farm in northern Scotland, I scheduled a team celebration. We'd cleared regulatory hurdles everyone said were impossible. My project coordinator brought champagne. The site engineer printed commemorative photos. We stood in mud, toasting ourselves, convinced we'd solved the hard part. We hadn't even started the hard part. That early-stage euphoria is a distinct psychological state. Not simply optimism, but something more intoxicating. The sensation that you've discovered a secret passage through ordinary existence. When you're 3 days into learning Portuguese, or 2 weeks into rebuilding a motorcycle engine, your brain operates under fundamentally different conditions than it will at week 12. You're not delusional exactly. The potential is real, but you're experiencing a chemically altered reality where obstacles register as interesting challenges rather than tedious barriers. This phase delivers rewards your brain desperately craves. Visible progress without accumulated fatigue. Every practice session with your new camera produces photographs noticeably better than the last. Every vocabulary list expands your capabilities in ways you can immediately demonstrate. You're collecting wins without having depleted your initial reserves of patience, without confronting the reality that improvement follows a logarithmic curve where early gains give way to incremental struggles. The sensation mimics falling in love, which isn't coincidental. The same neurological systems activate. Anthropologist Helen Fisher's research on romantic attachment identified a specific cocktail of neurotransmitters that create what she calls attraction. Elevated dopamine, suppressed serotonin, the whole intoxicating package that makes new relationships feel like they've unlocked previously hidden capacities within yourself. Fisher, 1998 and 2004. New projects trigger remarkably similar patterns. You're not imagining the magic. You're experiencing genuine neurochemical enchantment. What made those wind farm celebrations dangerous wasn't that we were wrong to celebrate. We'd accomplished real things, but that we unconsciously conflated early wins with sustainable momentum. The psychology of beginnings creates a specific blindness. We remember feeling energized at 6 a.m. project meetings and assume we'll always feel that way, forgetting that novelty itself was providing the energy. Guitar teachers encounter this constantly. Students arrive for Lesson 4 radiating enthusiasm, having mastered 3 chords, convinced they'll be performing within months. By Lesson 12, when they're still drilling chord transitions, something has shifted. The activity hasn't changed. Their capacity hasn't diminished. But the relationship between effort and reward has fundamentally transformed, and nobody warned them this was coming. The psychology of novelty. Your brain's reward system doesn't care about your long-term goals. It cares about prediction errors, the gap between what you expected and what you got. When that gap tilts positive, when reality exceeds prediction, your ventral tegmental area releases dopamine like a slot machine paying out. This isn't a metaphor. The same neural circuitry that makes gambling addictive makes new hobbies irresistible. Novelty represents the ultimate positive prediction error. You expected nothing from woodworking because you'd never tried it. Then you successfully cut a mortise joint. Your brain didn't predict that competence, so it rewards you disproportionately, not for the objective difficulty of the task, but for the subjective surprise of succeeding at something unfamiliar. Neuroscientist Wolfram Schultz demonstrated this through experiments where monkeys received unexpected juice rewards. Dopamine neurons fired intensely for surprises, moderately for predicted rewards, and went silent when expected rewards failed to materialize. Schultz et al., 1997. Your hobbies follow identical patterns. During week 2 of learning Italian, every word you acquire feels like a genuine expansion of capability, because it is. You're moving from zero to something. Your prediction error remains consistently positive. You open Duolingo expecting to struggle and instead successfully order coffee in a new language. Dopamine floods in, stamping that behavior as worth repeating. The system worked beautifully when our ancestors explored new territories. Novelty often signaled resources, making it evolutionarily advantageous to find new experiences intrinsically rewarding. But novelty is self-terminating. The 15th Italian lesson stops surprising you. Your brain now predicts that you'll successfully conjugate regular verbs because you've done it repeatedly. The prediction error collapses towards zero. Same effort, same objective progress, radically diminished neurochemical reward. You haven't failed. The relationship between action and reinforcement has fundamentally shifted. This phenomenon appears constantly in professional settings. Initial enthusiasm for new projects or roles often peaks during the novel startup phase. As tasks become routine, whether managing the 40th identical system deployment or processing similar data sets, the psychological experience shifts. While objective progress continues, the brain no longer registers the same rewarding prediction error. Studies show that high intrinsic motivation for one task can even make subsequent, less engaging tasks feel more tedious by comparison. Shin and Grant, 2019. The cruelest aspect? Researching new hobbies triggers the same dopamine response. The brain treats the discovery of novel information as inherently rewarding, activating the same circuitry as primary motivators like food or money. Xu et al., 2019. Reading about pottery techniques, watching YouTube videos about throwing bowls, comparing kiln prices, all generate prediction errors as you acquire information. This neurochemical reward for learning explains why you can spend hours researching hiking boots and feel exhausted without having walked anywhere. Xu et al., 2019. Interests fade not because you chose wrong, but because your neurochemistry was never designed to sustain enthusiasm past the discovery phase. Avoiding the enthusiasm trap. The honeymoon phase practically begs us to make terrible decisions. When enthusiasm runs high, buying the deluxe guitar package instead of the beginner model feels like visionary thinking rather than financial folly. Signing up for all the pottery classes in the catalog seems like dedication, not the scheduling disaster it will become by week 3. Overcommitment thrives in this phase because our excited brains genuinely believe we've discovered limitless time and energy reserves. The most dangerous trap? Unrealistic expectations about the learning curve. You've watched enough YouTube tutorials to convince yourself that proficiency is just around the corner. Maybe 2 weeks away, 3 tops. When month 2 arrives and you're still struggling with basic chord changes or uneven bowl walls, the gap between expectation and reality opens like a sinkhole. Suddenly, what felt like a natural talent reveals itself as actual work, requiring actual practice. Here's what works better. Start smaller than feels exciting. If your enthusiasm screams daily practice sessions, commit to 3 times weekly instead. When your credit card whispers professional equipment, buy the mid-range option that allows for growth without financial regret. These aren't fun choices in the moment. They feel like dampening your own fire. But sustainable enthusiasm requires building in buffer zones for the inevitable reality check. The person who budgets 2 hours weekly for their new language learning app will still be showing up when the person who blocked out 90 minutes daily has already disappeared into guilty avoidance. The difference isn't passion. It's leaving room for life to continue happening while your new interest finds its actual place within it. Think of honeymoon phase decisions as contracts with your future self. That future version of you, the one facing Tuesday evening fatigue and competing priorities, deserves commitments they can actually keep. Enthusiasm makes a terrible financial advisor and an even worse scheduler. Let it inspire you, absolutely. Just don't let it do your planning. When the spark fades, facing the reality of commitment. The reality check moment. The shift from passion to obligation doesn't announce itself with a trumpet fanfare. It whispers in the moments between actions, when you check your phone before starting, when you find 3 urgent reasons to reorganize a drawer first, when "just 5 more minutes" becomes your most used phrase. The exact moment varies by person and pursuit, but the pattern remains remarkably consistent. Excitement stops generating energy and starts requiring it. Most people recognize this shift weeks after it happens, convinced they're simply having an off day that somehow stretches into an off month. The awareness gap matters because it's during those unacknowledged weeks that you double down on commitment. Buying advanced equipment, signing up for courses, telling everyone who will listen about your new passion. By the time you admit the spark has dimmed, you've already constructed an elaborate scaffold of investment that makes walking away feel like demolishing a monument to your own fickleness. Start mapping your last 3 abandoned interests. Write them down. Then beside each, note when excitement peaked and when obligation crept in, not when you officially quit, but when continuing required willpower instead of creating it. Look for patterns in timing, circumstances, or triggers. Did the shift happen when complexity increased? When progress plateaued? When the novelty wore off but mastery remained distant? Project managers use reality checkpoints to prevent runaway commitment to failing initiatives. Apply the same framework to your interests. Schedule 3 specific assessment moments before declaring lifelong devotion. Week 3 catches the post-honeymoon dip. Week 6 reveals whether you're building genuine skill or collecting attractive props. Week 12 distinguishes sustainable engagement from stubborn persistence. At each checkpoint, ask yourself one ruthlessly honest question. Would I choose this activity right now if I discovered it today, knowing exactly what it requires? This question cuts through sunk cost thinking and aspirational identity construction. It doesn't matter how much you've already invested or how impressive the pursuit looks on paper. What matters is whether the activity itself, stripped of its novelty costume, still captivates you. Confronting the commitment conundrum. When enthusiasm shifts from joy to obligation, you've crossed into territory that demands attention. The excitement that once pulled you forward now pushes you from behind, and somewhere in that reversal lies information worth examining. The substitution test cuts through wishful thinking faster than most diagnostics. Replace your current pursuit with something equally time-consuming but completely different. Volunteering at an animal shelter instead of learning pottery, or organizing community events instead of studying Italian. If the thought brings immediate relief, you're probably running from something rather than toward something. Genuine interests resist substitution because the specific activity matters, not just its capacity to fill hours and quiet uncomfortable thoughts. Try audience removal next. Strip away every external witness to your progress. No social media posts, no casual mentions at gatherings, no visible markers of your new identity. Would you continue if absolutely no one knew? This question separates intrinsic motivation from performance anxiety, masquerading as passion, though answering honestly requires confronting how much we've trained ourselves to disguise external validation as personal fulfillment. The tedium inventory demands uncomfortable specificity. List 10 boring, repetitive, unglamorous tasks your chosen pursuit actually requires. For woodworking, sanding the same surface multiple times, sweeping sawdust for the third time today, oiling tools you barely use. For language learning, drilling conjugations that refuse to stick, reviewing vocabulary you've forgotten again, repeating pronunciation exercises until your mouth aches. Then ask yourself, can I genuinely tolerate this list for the next 6 months? Not endure it or power through it. Tolerate it as the actual substance of the activity. Track your thoughts during the activity itself through a displacement log. If your mind consistently wanders to work problems, relationship tensions, or existential questions while you're supposedly engaged in your hobby, the pursuit is functioning as avoidance rather than genuine interest. Real engagement generates presence. Escapism generates distraction, decorated with props. Energy accounting reveals another truth. Does the activity leave you depleted or restored? Both answers can indicate authentic interest. Challenging pursuits exhaust, while flow states energize. But chronic resentful depletion signals misalignment. Track this for 2 weeks, noting your state immediately after each session, not hours later when memory has already edited the experience. These frameworks rarely produce comfortable answers. That's precisely their value. Rekindling the initial excitement. Most people rescue drowning interests the same way they'd approach a failing project, throwing resources at symptoms while ignoring structural problems. You buy better equipment, watch more tutorials, join online communities, all valid responses to the wrong diagnosis. The premature scaling trap catches enthusiasts who never actually mastered fundamentals. You've been learning guitar for 3 months, but can't cleanly transition between basic chords because you jumped to fingerpicking tutorials that looked impressive on Instagram. Recovery requires humiliating regression, back to open chords, back to metronome practice at embarrassingly slow tempos, back to exercises that feel beneath your current identity as someone who owns a Martin and follows jazz guitarists. This exact pattern destroyed large-scale projects, notably the initial automated baggage system at Denver International Airport in the 1990s. Developers skipped crucial foundational testing of the complex system, leading to constant malfunctions and billions in cost overruns and delays. Ultimately, much of it had to be dismantled and redesigned, demonstrating the costly consequences of premature scaling over basic verification. National Research Council, 1998. Conversely, the perpetual preparation stall keeps you endlessly researching, organizing, and optimizing without actually doing the work. You've reorganized your Italian vocabulary system 4 times, but still can't hold a basic conversation. The recovery here demands the opposite intervention. Impose a research ban. No new apps, no new methodologies, no tutorial consumption for 2 weeks. Just direct, uncomfortable engagement with your current tools and knowledge gaps. Context collapse kills interest when you've stripped the pursuit of everything that made it compelling. Maybe you started painting because you loved wandering art museums, but now you're grinding through online courses in a windowless room at 10 p.m. The activity hasn't failed you. You've surgically removed its supporting ecosystem. Restoration requires environmental reconstruction. Paint at the botanical garden, sketch at cafes, visit galleries again, even if you're not productive during those hours. The ghost commitment drains energy invisibly. You're not practicing pottery anymore, but you haven't formally quit either. Equipment occupies your garage, Unfinished projects guilt trip you from shelves, and you're still paying for studio time you haven't used in 6 weeks. This liminal state consumes more psychological resources than either committed practice or clean abandonment. Pick one deliberately. When multiple diagnostic frameworks point toward genuine misalignment rather than temporary frustration, strategic abandonment becomes the sophisticated choice, not the shameful one. Cancel subscriptions today, not next billing cycle. Sell or donate equipment this weekend while it still holds value. Document what you learned in 15 minutes of honest writing, then close that chapter completely. This creates space for whatever comes next, instead of maintaining expensive monuments to intentions you've outgrown. Recovery speed depends entirely on diagnosis accuracy. Addressing the wrong problem with the right intensity just accelerates failure. Finding joy in the journey. Perfection has killed more interests than difficulty ever did. When you decide only museum-worthy paintings count, or that conversational Italian means flawless accent and subjunctive mastery, you've constructed an evaluation framework that guarantees disappointment. This isn't ambition. It's a protection mechanism that lets you quit while preserving your ego. The trap operates through time compression. You compare your month 3 results against someone's decade 10 expertise, forgetting that every accomplished ceramicist spent years producing lopsided bowls. Social media algorithmically hides this reality. You see polished sourdough loaves, not the 40 dense bricks that preceded them. Your brain registers the gap between your clumsy attempts and their refined results as evidence of inadequacy, rather than what it actually represents. Different positions on the same timeline. Progress lives in the messy middle. That watercolor where you finally understood how wet-on-wet technique works, even though the trees look drunk. The French conversation where you butchered half the verbs but successfully ordered coffee without pointing. The running session where you didn't stop to walk, even though your pace would embarrass a determined tortoise. These moments contain the actual substance of learning. They're where interest deepens from novelty into capability, where effort transforms into incremental skill. The perfectionist framework dismisses them as failures because they don't match the imagined endpoint. The journey-focused approach recognizes them as evidence you're moving forward. What if you tracked differently? Instead of measuring against some fictional finish line, notice what you couldn't do last month that you managed today. The chord progression that sounded like cats fighting now resembles actual music. The recipe you botched 3 times finally worked. You remembered to breathe during the yoga pose instead of holding your breath like you're defusing a bomb. This isn't lowering standards. It's recognizing that skill accumulates through repeated imperfect attempts, not through waiting until you're good enough to begin. The guitarist with calloused fingers earned them through thousands of awkward buzzing chords. The knitter with the gorgeous sweaters? She's got a drawer full of misshapen scarves she'll never show anyone. Your interest survives when you grant yourself the same grace. The commitment phase rewards those who find fascination in incremental progress, who can laugh at their disasters while appreciating that each disaster taught them something the YouTube tutorial couldn't. It punishes those who need every session to feel like triumph, who require constant validation that they're naturally talented. So ask yourself, can you enjoy being terrible at something while slowly becoming less terrible? Can you find humor in your mistakes instead of shame? Can you celebrate the small victories, the slightly better brush stroke, the marginally cleaner note, without demanding they prove you're destined for mastery? Because that's where genuine interest lives, not in the fantasy of effortless expertise, but in the messy, awkward, occasionally ridiculous process of getting better at something that matters to you.